Is it still morning? Good morning still, everyone. For those who are around for the first hearing, thank you for staying and as we start our second part of these public hearings. We're going to now call this public hearing to order. This is a joint City Council Committee on Streets and Services and Public Safety. The purpose of this public hearing is to hear testimony on resolution number 170224. Ms. Williams?
Resolution number 170224, a resolution authorizing the Joint Committees on Streets and Services and Public Safety to hold hearing on the implementation of traffic calming plans around Philadelphia's schools and child care centers.
I recognize the presence of a quorum of these committees represented in Councilman Tullenberger, Councilwoman Bass, myself, Councilwoman Blackwell, and Councilwoman Gim. Is there an opening statement by my colleague?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. And I wanted to thank all of you for being here. My colleagues, and especially Chairman Jones and Chairman Squilla, I understand is on his way, for making the time to convene this meeting. I know it can be challenging to schedule joint committee hearings, especially at this time of year when we're all trying to squeeze in so much. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to come together and discuss a really important issue that we're dealing with not only in the 8th District, but throughout the city, which is creating safe traffic environments for our children as they walk to and from school. In the 8th District, there are 33 public and charter schools with a total enrollment of nearly 22,000 students. In addition, we have over 300 child care facilities. Many of these, especially daycare centers, are located on busy streets and intersections. And I see this all the time, where you have kids darting into traffic, crossing in front or behind buses or other vehicles, cars double parked, and drivers on their cell phone. All of these factors contribute to a situation where a tragedy can occur in an instant. I've had the opportunity to meet with Commissioner Carlton Williams on numerous occasions, held neighborhood walkthroughs at particularly dangerous locations in my district, and worked alongside the Streets Department on developing traffic safety improvement plans. When it comes to looking at schools and child care centers, I want to know what improvements we can make as a city to make our children safer. According to an October 2016 report by Safe Kids Worldwide titled Alarming Dangers in School Zones, which observed nearly 100,000 student and driver behaviors in school zones in 15 states, it was found that 17% of middle school students and 27% of high school students were distracted by mobile devices, cell phones. Only 4 out of 10 school zones had speed limits of 20 miles per hour or less. Marked crosswalks were missing in 3 out of 10 crossings. 1 in 10 drivers were distracted by mobile devices while arriving or departing from school. Nearly 1 in 3 drivers displayed other unsafe behavior, such as double parking or stopping in the middle of a crosswalk while dropping off students. Crossing guards were present at 3 out of 10 middle schools and only 1 out of 10 high schools. In addition, the city's own Vision Zero traffic safety survey found that 53% of respondents do not feel that children can walk safely to school or parks in their neighborhood. Of these, 79% reported fear of traffic to be the reason. We are also facing a real problem in the city of Philadelphia with meeting the need for available crossing guards, the topic of another resolution which I introduced last year. I've heard from several schools in my area, and I know that Councilman Heenan is dealing with the same issues in his district, as are many of my other colleagues. So with all of this in mind, I hope that what we can accomplish today is to get a better sense of the scope of the problem, look at some potential solution, and move towards some specific and tangible strategies to creating safer traffic conditions for our city's children and families. And once again, I want to thank Councilman Jones and all of my colleagues for being here today. Thank you very much, and of course for everyone who came down to testify. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman, for bringing up this issue. As I listened to your comments, I couldn't help but think of several schools where this is a huge problem in my district. And a couple of them my grandkids go to, so in particular, I want to pay attention. And as I think about it, some of the schools took it unto themselves to provide staffing. Some of them could not get crossing guards because they are charter schools, and they don't allow for that. And some of the parents, in an effort to try to hurry up, get to where they're going, don't take the time to consider safety. And, so I'm glad you're doing this.
Thank you.
And I'm going to pay particular attention. Ms. Williams, are you there?
Yeah,
Sam?
I'm here.
Who's our first group to testify?
Christopher Pahalski and Kasim Ali.
Good morning, Councilman Jones and other members of the Complete Streets and Public Service and Streets and Services and Public Safety Committees. I am Christopher Pahalski, the Director of Policy and Strategic Initiatives at the Office of Transportation and Infrastructure Systems, also known as OTIS. OTIS, headed by Deputy Managing Director Michael Carroll, is charged with driving change through our transportation and infrastructure systems. OTIS leads a portfolio of departments including streets transportation, street sanitation, and the Philadelphia Water Department to provide cost-effective services focused on the resident. I'm joined today by Kasim Ali, Acting Chief Traffic Engineer in the Streets Department. I'm here to testify on Resolution 170224 introduced by Councilwoman Bass regarding traffic calming measures. Protecting children, ensuring that automobiles travel at a safe speed everywhere, but especially near schools and daycare centers, is critically important. And I'd like to personally thank the Councilwoman for introducing this resolution to have some more conversation on this important topic. In October 2017, OTIS was happy to lead the creation of the 3-year Vision Zero action plan. Across the world, Vision Zero is saving lives. First adopted as a national policy in Sweden in 1997, Vision Zero is a strategy to eliminate all traffic-related deaths and serious injuries, while increasing health, safety, and mobility for all. Vision Zero focuses on how people naturally behave. People make mistakes. People make mistakes every day. Kids run out into the streets, but these mistakes should not be fatal. We may never be able to prevent all crashes, but we can put people first and prevent the most serious and fatal crashes. The airline industry and railroads have a zero-tolerance policy. Zero tolerance for traffic deaths is next. Vision Zero prioritizes human life and seeks to eliminate the prevailing sentiment that traffic crashes are inevitable accidents. We don't believe that. Successful Vision Zero programs recognize that there is safety in numbers, that increasing numbers of people walking and biking make these activities safer, as well as improve the health of our city. Vision Zero focuses attention on the shortcomings of the transportation system itself, rather than changing people's behavior. Through road design, education, and traffic safety enforcement, we can eliminate traffic-related deaths. Vision Zero works. After sustained efforts for traffic safety in New York City, New York last year had the fewest number of fatal traffic fatalities on record since they first started keeping track of them in 1910. Traffic calming is a collection of techniques designed to slow vehicle speeds. Whereas in the past, traffic engineers and planners thought that designing a street for traffic faster than the speed limit would make it safe. We now know that this method only encourages excessive speeding. We also know now that streets should be designed with cues that instruct drivers to drive at a speed that is both comfortable and safe. This is the essence of traffic calming. We know that speed kills. I've got this chart beside me to illustrate this. A pedestrian struck at 20 miles an hour has a 90% chance of surviving that crash. While one struck at 40 miles an hour only has a 10% chance of surviving. Speed control is central to Vision Zero and essential to keeping kids safe. You can see here the middle one, going from just 20 to 30 takes your chance of surviving from 90% down to 50%. So slowing down even just a little bit saves lives. Otis and the Streets Department have several upcoming projects to implement traffic calming. Slow zones at Cramp Elementary, neighborhood slow zones, a program to work with communities to slow traffic down to be rolled out later this year. Several Safe Routes to Schools program, Make Way for Children, 2 grants that we got in 2015 and 2016, and Vision Zero Safer Streets around schools. We've recently worked with several council people, including Councilman Jones and the council president, on traffic calming projects on Parkside Avenue, JFK, Market, Ray Street, and Chestnut Street. And we're working currently on safety improvements on North Broad Street. In addition, the Streets Department deploys traffic calming devices such as speed cushions at the request of neighbors. Any group of neighbors can ask the Streets Department to install a speed cushion on their street if they get 75% of the households to sign a petition. The Streets Department will conduct a study, and if certain conditions apply in the block, that block will be prioritized for the installation of a speed cushion. We have appreciated the partnership with Council on these projects that are ongoing, and we look forward to cooperation with you on these and future projects to keep all of our residents safe, especially those who are most vulnerable. Only by working together can we achieve the goal of 0 traffic deaths and serious injuries by 2030. Thank you for this opportunity to testify today, and Mr. Ali and I are glad to answer your questions.
Thank you. Are you testifying, Mr. Ali?
No.
Because I asked you that last time. You said you wanted to, and I wanted to find out.
I just wanted to clarify a few things when we were talking earlier.
But you sure? All right, thank you. Are there any questions?
Yes.
Councilwoman Bass.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I just had a couple of questions. So the first is that when it comes to a new school or a new daycare opening, does the city require at this time any sort of strategic planning around traffic calming, or just how will kids get from one side of the street to the other? How will they, navigate traffic? Will there, any the traffic lights that need to go in, the flashing lights? Do we do any of that right now when a school or a daycare opens? Is that a part of the opening process?
Again, Qasim Ali, Acting Chief Traffic Engineer. Yes, to answer your question, Councilwoman, we have a process in place where once a school comes in, and we define school as K through 12, they send an application in requesting appropriate signage and school flashers. And what we do is basically we put them on a ranking list as they come in. And every time, most of the time, every year we have a contract out or a project which basically installs all the school flashers across the city.
Okay. Does every school in the city have flashers?
Most of them do, yes. But
Okay.
recently a lot of schools have moved around, and some charter schools have kind of, popped up without a notification or...
Say again, I'm sorry.
Some
Can you pull the mic closer too?
Some charter schools have kind of come into existence, and we were not aware of them. Mm-hmm. So now that we are, and we tell them that they need to send us a request for school signage and school flasher, and we just send them the application. Once the application comes in, that school gets on a list also.
Okay. So is that an automatic process when they notify the city that they intend to put a school at that location?
Yes. Once they tell us, then we tell them, okay, because they are letting us know, and they're saying, okay, it is a K through 12 as per our definition of school. And then we say, okay, you need to fill in these forms and send them in. And that's how the process starts then.
Let me ask, and I'm going to bring a specific school that comes to mind. I'm going to bring them into the conversation, which is the Wissahickon Charter School,
Okay.
which was open at the intersection of Chew and Washington Lane. And is a very dangerous intersection. It's, there's constant, a heavy flow of traffic. Some people who are driving at regular speeds and some people who are speeding. There are a number of bus routes that travel through that intersection. And so it makes for, with the addition of the school and the existing commerce that happens, there's a supermarket in the area, there's a sort of like a mini mart in the area, there's a gas station on another corner. So it makes for a very busy intersection. And when the Wissahickon Charter School went into that location several years ago, there was no traffic calming, anything involved included, at all. We've been trying to work to find the appropriate remedies other than, they're interested in having a crosswalk. We have some concerns about the safety of the children because crosswalks only work if people respect them, if the driver respects them. And it's been my experience that people respect a stoplight more than a crosswalk for whatever reason. And so my question is, how is it that we were able to have this school go in without that sort of a traffic plan in terms of how the young people were going to be able to cross from one area to another?
Well, in many of the cases, we find out after the fact. The school has already gone in.
So that's why I was asking, was it an automatic process that we would find out? So it happened beforehand rather than after the fact.
Exactly. And plus, the state requires every school that goes in or daycare center to conduct a safety study. And most of them do not do that. And then,
do we require it as well? Does the city require a safety study?
No, the city does not. We don't have legislation in place, but we should.
We will.
And and a lot of time they just come in, and we know it's a dangerous area because a lot of times there are streets, major arterial streets as we call it, where there is significant traffic and it has speeding issues associated with that. Just a step back, a lot of streets which are state routes, state specifically says that we cannot install any kind of traffic calming measures, especially the vertical deflections like speed humps or speed cushions or that kind of stuff. And the manual on traffic calming specifically says that.
It says that you cannot
install any traffic calming devices on a state route and a numbered route.
So just so I'm clear, so the state law is that the city cannot put down a speed bump or speed hump, whatever you want to call it, on a state highway.
Yes.
Right, and the state is responsible for, if there were to be such a, an issue with speeding, the state will be responsible for addressing the traffic calming measures on a state highway.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
I'll just add to that, Councilwoman Bass, that Rich Montanez, the Deputy Director for Transportation and Streets, is working with PennDOT to try to fix some of these issues where the current regulations, the current state law, the publications do prevent the installation of traffic calming on state routes. We are working with PennDOT right now to change some of the regulations, and Councilwoman Jones will remember from the project on Allegheny Avenue, where he was fighting for safety for kids in that neighborhood. There were some prohibitions that prevented the installation of traffic calming devices on that corridor. I think that and several other situations really highlighted some of the deficiencies in the current state regulations, and we've been critical, and we've been partnering with Pittsburgh and other cities to get PennDOT to take a look at these regulations and say, we can't have one size fit all for the whole state. We've got some unique situation here in our urban areas that maybe they're not right for rural areas, or maybe they are, but we know we got a need here, and we would like you to change that. And we have gotten some receptive audiences at PennDOT, and these processes don't change overnight, but we are working on them.
Well, I'm glad to hear we're working with PennDOT and the Commonwealth, as there are a significant number of state highways here in the city of Philadelphia. But just going back to the streets that the city is responsible for, when we look at those streets, what kind of measures do we put in place? Let's say, for example, if a new daycare was to open. In my district, I would say that one of the largest group of new businesses are daycares, childcare facilities. And they're on every commercial corridor, and nearby, because as people are, going to work, coming from work, stopping, exchanging buses, whatever they're doing, one of the factors is convenience, as well as, quality of care and those sorts of things. But convenience matters as well. So when we talk about the number of daycare centers that are on our commercial corridors and in our neighborhoods, does the city have any requirement of those that when they apply, that there is some sort of a traffic plan, calming measure, anything that has to be required of them before they open in the neighborhoods?
First, yeah, there are no such provisions in place, and I don't think there's any mechanism for them to inform us in advance, because we are not aware of these daycares. We only are made aware after the fact. So if we are made aware in advance, we can look at the type of street it is falling on, where the main entrance or main loading, unloading of kids is going to take place, and we could take some action to it. Plus, right now schools are defined as K through 12, so daycare also needs to be added to it, as like you are saying, most of the new daycares are popping up everywhere, and they need some kind of traffic safety. So that would be a good start. Have some kind of legislation in place that they have to inform us in advance and ask us. On the flip side, like I said earlier, the state does require a safety study, which 9 out of 10, I can tell you, I haven't been here for a while, don't do it. And then the pressure is on us. And then what happens is we try and kind of, do things which may or may not work very effectively. So once we have these things in place, perhaps we can do our job better and be more helpful.
Okay. Can you, does the city keep data on the number of pedestrian injuries and even fatalities that occur in school zones?
We have all the data, but we don't regularly tabulate them. But we could do an analysis of the 5-year crash data that we used for the Vision Zero plan.
We voted out that they have to report in a timely fashion to the district council when there's a fatality.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, Councilwoman, can
yes.
I add a little thing? Whenever there's a part of monies we're applying for grant, a lot of times it's school related. So once we are working on that school-related grant, what we do is we kind of evaluate which are the most vulnerable schools, which schools we can identify where most of the crashes are occurring during school hours, under certain age. Then what we do is we rank them, and then we basically put those schools' names in the request for that assistance or funding.
Okay.
So we have done that in the past.
Okay. And do we have an idea of how much we budget right now for safety and traffic calming around schools and daycares versus, other traffic calming measures like on residential streets or bike lanes or, like any other? Do we have any sort of, does the city have a strategy for, how we're addressing all these different issues? And a budget that matches it?
Yeah. We do have a strategy. We have a Safe Routes to School program. We got a Safe Routes to School grant we were awarded, and we're currently working to get under contract. And we this year hired a Safe Routes to School coordinator who's going to be rolling out education programs at 25 different schools that are in high crash corridors, as defined by the high injury network that is in our Vision Zero 3-year action plan. I can give you some grant award amounts for some recent grants that we've won. There was a 2015 PennDOT multimodal grant that was $811,000. There's was a second one in 2016 that was $950,000. We were just recently awarded improvements for Cramp Elementary that was $995,000, and a grant, Vision Zero, safer streets around schools for $500,000. And we're continuing, whenever there's a grant round coming up from the state, we're applying for grant funds. And
Okay.
yeah, I can't remember the name of it. There was one that we have recently applied for and didn't get, but we're going to keep putting on. We do have a list of safety studies, walkability audits, et cetera, that were done around schools. So we have some idea of the improvements that were needed, and then we're prioritizing them on high crash locations and other equity measures to prioritize them to submit for grants to the state.
Okay.
I think there is a capacity issue, though, in the streets department. We only have so much funding to try to balance all the different high priority needs around for safety around the city.
So back up on that in terms of the capacity issue. I'm not understanding what you mean.
Yeah.
Are you saying that there's not enough resources, there's not enough people power to get the jobs done?
Yeah, so one of the reasons that the mayor's current budget proposal has a grants unit in the streets department is to try to make sure that these grants are processed and that they can be implemented in a timely manner.
Okay, so once a grant's received, what's the turnaround time to shovels in the ground and the project starting?
It can be about, for some of the recent ones, it looks about 4 or 5 years between, there's a grant awarded, but that's just something, that was put out as an award. It usually takes 6 months to a year to get that grant even under contract. So we can start working on it. And then we've got to go through all the design and, final engineering steps and the community outreach around that. So it is a several year process with the resources that we currently have in the streets department. And the streets department is currently managing about 5 times the number of grants that they had 10 years ago. So we have been successful. That's a good news story. We've been successful in getting a lot of funds to make these and other improvements, but that just speaks to a large volume of money that needs to be managed and projects that need to be managed with actually less staff than they had 10 years ago. So it is a challenge to get these grants done as quickly as possible, which we are committed to doing.
So how do we, if this is an urgent issue, if this is a priority, if this is something that we want to, ensure our young people are safe, or listen, our young people, our old people, and everybody in between, if we want to make sure that people are safe crossing streets in the city of Philadelphia, I think that we have to figure out ways to prioritize these projects. It cannot be a 4 or 5 year process. If we know we apply for a grant to fix a problem, but are we really fixing a problem if we're waiting 4 or 5 years? Because by then the problem's probably different, the problem's probably changed. It's not the original problem, and it's probably 2 to 3 or more times what the original situation was. It's probably greatly changed, exponentially changed. So waiting 4 or 5 years, and I'm not just saying you're waiting and doing nothing, but there has to be a way that if safety is a concern, and I hear from my residents every single day in my district who are greatly concerned about their children's safety, their safety. I was at a meeting just last week where, a woman said that she fears for her life just getting in her car. And they live on a street, in the Northwest, and just getting in and out of her car with her 2 young sons is disconcerting, because you never know what children are going to do. You try to keep a close hand on them. You try to make sure they're doing the right things and getting in the car in an orderly fashion. But if somebody pulls away and darts across the street because they see something or something else happens, it's a very, very dangerous situation. So I say all of that to say that waiting 4 to 5 years, because that's what the process is, says to me that the process is in desperate need of change. So
yeah, I agree. And those are for the big, difficult, capital-intensive changes, such as moving curb lines, putting bump outs. But we don't just wait for that to happen. The streets department does go out and, like Councilman said, put flashers, or making sure the crosswalks are in good condition. Targeting enforcement efforts if there's a problem in a certain location. So we do the quick things that we can do right away, and then we apply for the grants for the longer term capital intensive measures.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman again.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Councilwoman Bass for pushing on this important issue. I think you and I, Mr. Pachalski, have had a lot of conversations about the importance of this area, so I appreciate Streets Department's work on this. We had an earlier hearing that you were at in which it'll require the reporting out of dangerous intersections. I think you and I had spoken before about whether we can do that. That specifically applies to the most dangerous intersections that are within a quarter mile of a school. So the bill doesn't specifically require it on that level, but similarly, could you confirm that we have that list of the most dangerous intersections that are near schools?
Yeah, so from the last hearing, we're going to go back and we're going to put together a list of the 10 most dangerous intersections in the city. It wasn't, I think the request from the previous hearing wasn't specific about schools, but if you'd like that, we could try to get of the intersections near schools, get the most dangerous.
Yes, I think that's part of the request. I know that we've been interested in that question, in part because, as the Councilwoman said so clearly, we're trying to find a way to prioritize. It really does help us so that if we know about these intersections, we can inform the different schools and the other communities. We can help do some kind of training or whatever that we need to alert families to. But because the previous bill doesn't specifically say that, it would help if the Streets Department could send over to the two chairs of the committee the list of all the intersections, the most dangerous intersections within that quarter mile of schools. I think that's one of the areas that I know that would help us be able to lift up some of our priorities. I think you spoke already with the council member about the different grants that Streets Department is already participating in. I think you've covered, we recognize that there are some traffic calming measures that we can certainly engage in. There's a menu of options that the city can choose from depending on what our budget is or the extent of or the dangerous nature of the particular intersection. But I think that one of the questions that has been raised before is, the ways in which, again, we're communicating out and letting people know this is an extremely dangerous place. And I think if you could just, clarify again what Streets Department is doing or what we could do in combination with Streets Department to just let communities know this is a particularly dangerous area. It might help us be able to work some of this stuff out. And then just as a side note, Frankfurt Ave was just a disaster for a really long time. And the communities there were extremely aggressive about demanding crosswalks and a better addressing. The situation, as you know, was extremely complicated, crisscrossed 3 councilmatic districts. It involved removal potentially of parking spaces, so it was extremely complicated. But I think it helped drive some of the changes that we were successfully able to finally accomplish there. And that's sort of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think your statement just now does speak to sometimes all the different constraints in solving these problems. There are financial constraints. Just the resources are there to identify the places, do the initial work, identify the improvements, apply for the grants, and then do the short and long-term fixes of it. Some of the improvements, though, for example, if it results in the loss of parking spots, those are conversations that we have to have with communities, and that involving you and the other council people, I think is really valuable in having those conversations and making sure that people see the need. We all like being able to park easily and wherever we want, but making sure people really see the need to keep our kids safe and that there's going to be a real benefit to some of the trade-offs that we're asking communities to make to keep the kids safe. So.
Right. So I think that because when the conversation with our community starts with safety and a recognition that this safety is not just perceived but is backed up by data, which is partly why it's so important to have the most dangerous intersections near schools with children involved, accidents that involve children in particular. Those things help us accelerate that conversation a lot better. And then I think back to my original question, though, have you thought about other ways in which you can better engage communities, even if we don't necessarily have all the resources together, have the whole answer, but just highlighting this is an extremely dangerous intersection, what are we trying to accomplish here? And have you thought about ways to be more civically engaged on that end?
Yes, we have. So I mentioned it briefly, but later this year we're going to roll out a neighborhood slow zones program. That's some money we've gotten from the state, and I think there's two basic things we're trying to accomplish. One is make neighborhoods safer. And that includes, for kids, walking to school or daycare or wherever they happen to be going. But the other way is to really pilot new ways of working with communities. So it's not us coming, landing from another planet and telling people this is the improvement you need to make in your community, but really working up front and inviting communities into the process. All the way from getting applications in and making sure that communities that haven't always gotten their share, some that have been historically disadvantaged, making sure that they get included into this first round of the program, and then working with those communities to bring some data into it so they can see what the data says, but then also listening to them. And saying, what are your concerns, and then coming up with a plan of traffic calming and other measures to slow down traffic in that community. I mean, it's just piloting this whole belief that people have a right to have a voice in the infrastructure choices that affect their lives, and that's something that's driving us forward. It's driving the transportation plan that we're working on that we've discussed with you, and it's something that we want to pilot in this neighborhood slow zones program that later this year we hope to roll out.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I'm thankful that you did this. My wheels are turning by way of public safety end of this. How much do you collaborate with the school district?
I'll speak from Otis's perspective, and then maybe Qasim can from the streets department. Now that we've been moving to local control, our cooperation with the school district has really been increasing, and that's everything from stormwater projects that also have a safety component to the community schools. So we're looking to have community schools as one of the things that we look for to prioritize improvements for safety for those. So I think we've got a relationship that we're really starting to build more and more with the school district right now. And once we get this safe routes to school education efforts up and running, we hope to cooperate very closely to get into the schools to do education to kids, and working with teachers right in the schools so that we could drive home some of these messages, whether it's ways to walk safely, making sure you're not distracted, whatever the safety measures are. For education for the kids, we hope to continue to work really closely with the school district there.
Just want to, on the record, make sure the records reflect that Councilwoman Maria Sanchez and Co-Chair Squilla were here and probably will come back. So we're looking at a $4.5 billion infrastructure public health issue within our schools. We want these kinds of considerations considered as well, because getting hit by a vehicle can be hazardous to your health, just like bad drinking water. Mm-hmm. So we want to kind of work, if we're talking about major repairs to a facility, whether it's Wissahickon or Barry we had in here earlier, if we're making changes, we might want to consider some of these things. That's number one. Number two, a study probably should be, not a study, because that seems to always be indicative of a long period of time for a decision. The school district, and the reason I asked this question earlier, hires the crossing guards. And in a lot of cases, in particular intersections, they don't fill those crossing guards in a timely fashion. So we want to push them to make sure not only do we make physical improvements, whether it's lights or 15-mile-an-hour hazard lights, but how many of those dangerous intersections, I think the Councilwoman talked about, have crossing guards? It seems to me if you deem it dangerous, then deem it to have a crossing guard. Might be better than any speed bump. A crossing guard holding back traffic is probably the preferred option. And then finally, I guess what we want to do is make sure that reporting function that we talked about in the earlier piece gets to the councilwoman so that it gives her a heads up well before we start to get the fact that maybe Roosevelt Boulevard is dangerous. Well, if we got the statistics a little earlier, because we don't always catch the news every instance, but if we got those reports, we can get ahead of the curve, if you would. And then finally, I think we should work with SEPTA, because some of these schools have bus stops and trolley stops that are what comes to mind is a global leadership down at Girard and Belmont. Always at our roll call talks about how people are totally ignoring the traffic laws when it comes to going around trolleys, going around buses, and young people are taking their lives in their hands. All people are taking their lives in their hands. So if all of these things, I think the spirit of what Councilwoman Bass is talking about is a study to look at all of these different components, and they will tell us a story before a school is built, before a daycare opens. And I'm just thankful to you for bringing this to public attention.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Blackwell?
Thank you. Let me thank Councilwoman Bass as well. And before schools open and before other schools close, we met with Dr. Height for classes at Lee School that are in these pre-K grouping of special classes. But I remember when Wilson School closed at 46 in Woodland, and we had children that had to cross Baltimore Avenue and Woodland and Chester and Baltimore, and it was just horrendous. So it's not only when schools open, but it's before schools close, we've got to deal with that as well. Thank you, and thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Bass.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention one other thing, and I was just glancing at a chart ahead, that was placed in front of me, and it's titled "Alarming Dangers in School Zones." And I'm just going to mention a few facts that jumped out at me, and particularly around teen pedestrians. And there's been a 13% increase in the pedestrian death rate for 12 to 19-year-olds since 2013. In 2015, while teens aged 15 to 19 made up 26% of all children aged 0 to 19, they made up about half of the pedestrian fatalities. And there are 5 teen pedestrian deaths every week in the United States. And, it may be hard to fathom, but if one of those 5 is one of your 5, okay? I think that people should look at these facts and take them very seriously. And I mention them about teenagers because I'm not even talking about the little ones, and those are the ones that I really most often worry about because they're the ones who are more likely to dart into the street and to, not be paying attention or to not have, if there's not an adult around to properly guide them. They're the ones who I think are even more at risk. So if these are the numbers for teens, it really does beg the question of what are the numbers and what does it look like for the younger population and how do we protect them? And so just going back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of notification and daycare centers and schools being in touch with the city and the school district to ask for traffic calming and to ask for assistance in engineering in terms of the streets and crossing and what's the traffic flow going to be. One of the things that we can do working with you all is to figure out, okay, well, should we put in no parking zones between these hours, school dismissal hours and school arrival hours, so that it's easier for me to come and pick up my child during those hours, and so that I can get in, I can get out. There's a traffic guard there, a crossing guard there, and it's a much smoother flow of traffic. Another school I think of that, makes me very, very nervous is the John Story Jenks School, which is located up on Germantown Avenue in Chestnut Hill, in which there's a lot of parents who are dropping off their children, and as they're dropping off, they're double parking, they're blocking in other parents, they're blocking in, other cars that are not dropping off children. And it's quite a scene. I think that they've effectively managed chaos. I think that they've done their very best to do that. But when you think about Jenks and all the other schools that are similarly situated, it becomes clear that we need to do much, much more. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Co-Chair Councilman Squilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you guys for presenting today and knowing how important it is. I mean, I know with the Complete Streets and Vision Zero, this is a high priority. So, especially in another accident last night on the streets of the city. So it's we need to look at ways to slow down traffic and make sure it's safer for all users of the streets, whether it's pedestrians, bicyclists, motorists, and everyone in between. So thank you for this time. Looking forward to continue to work with you to make sure we come up with a plan to enable this to move forward. So thank you.
Are there any other questions for this panel? Seeing none, Ms. Williams, are there others to testify?
Yes. Bob Praviti, Monique Pines, Nicholas Dabrowski, and Deborah Matafee.
Welcome. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
Please have a seat at the table. I'll
No
pull.
more bites, no more bites, not right now. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Okay.
Good morning, Councilwoman. Good afternoon, actually.
That was a organic reaction to. So, in any order, please pull your mic to you and state your name and begin your testimony, please.
Great. Hello, my name is Bob Praviti. Good afternoon, Chairman and all members of the committees. I am the policy coordinator for the Bicycle Coalition of Greater Philadelphia. I'm here to comment today on resolution number 170224. We wish to offer our support to City Council for this resolution and encourage that its objectives are considered within the context of the overall Vision Zero program, which the mayor adopted in September of 2016 when he signed an executive order. As part of the executive order, he hired the city's first ever Director of Complete Streets, Kelly Eman, who has prepared the city's Vision Zero Action Plan, which you can see at www.visionzerophl.org. The plan has taken a comprehensive review of all traffic crash data over the past 5 years and has identified the high injury crash network that I urge all of you become familiar with. The high injury crash network has identified that only 12% of the city's streets make up for.
Can you put your mic a little closer?
Only 12% of the city's streets make up half of all fatal crashes in the city. Understanding which roads are the most dangerous will allow the city to focus on limited resources and go a long way to reducing the risk that our children face every day throughout the city. This kind of systematic approach to traffic violence is something we need to encourage. Lastly, I would urge Council to move forward on holding hearings on Vision Zero, which have been called for by Resolution 171055 and 170656, which passed in June and November of 2017. And I have talked to Julian Thompson about scheduling something in June. He's hoping to schedule something in June. Both the public and council would benefit from learning more about this Vision Zero program's approaches and intentions and policies, because a systematic review of all traffic crashes, kids travel between schools, they travel to rec centers, they travel to libraries, and as you'll hear later, AARP is very concerned about this as well, not just for the 50-plus community, but their Livable Cities initiative is very concerned with allowing people to age in place properly. So it's something, mobility is something that we want to make sure is adequate and safe for all road users. So thank you for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Good
Thank you,
afternoon.
Councilwoman Bass, for initiating this hearing into the important issue of pedestrian safety, and thank you for inviting me to speak. My name is Monique Pines, and I'm here in multiple capacities representing the Germantown Avenue Commercial Corridor, including owner of a daycare center, owner of an art studio, the president of the 6300 Block Alliance, and board member of the Mount Airy Business Improvement District, as well as a resident. The Germantown Avenue Commercial Corridor is heavily trafficked and becoming more so every day as new development and businesses come to the avenue in Mount Airy and Germantown. However, measures to ensure pedestrian safety are sorely lacking. As a resident and a business owner, I have long been aware of the challenges for me as an adult in crossing the street. It's far worse for school children, seniors, families escorting their children to daycares like mine. The Mount Airy Business Improvement District just completed a survey of the crosswalks along the 2-mile stretch in Mount Airy. And here's what we discovered. There are very few intersections with traffic lights along this 2-mile stretch. With the exceptions of Duval Street, there are no additional crosswalks that might signal to cars that they should consider yielding the right-of-way to the pedestrians. From Washington Lane to the next traffic light at Johnson is nearly a quarter of a mile. And from Upsole Street to the next traffic light at Pelham is another quarter of a mile. And from Pelham to the next traffic light at Cedric Street, there's nearly a half of a mile. Along these stretches are daycare centers, schools, healthcare providers, food establishments, banks, and professional services. Given the impracticability of walking to a traffic light to cross the street, people of all ages and physical abilities are crossing the street unaided. Compounding the difficulties for pedestrians is that there's no posted speed limit on a commercial corridor, and if there's a rule about speed limits through commercial corridors that drivers study to acquire their Pennsylvania license, I'm sure that has long been forgotten. Consequently, the speed of traffic is way too fast, not only for pedestrians, but also for cars trying to enter the avenue from side streets. Almost daily, I hear car horns, honking, tires screeching as drivers slam on their brakes to try to maneuver these intersections. They don't yield to pedestrians who are trying to navigate the same area. Lastly, where there are existing crosswalks at the traffic lights, they are so badly faded in some places to be nearly non-existent. Again, crosswalks are a critical reminder to drivers to share the road with pedestrians. Here are our recommendations for steps that can be taken to protect pedestrian safety. Posting the speed limit, dedicate periodic policing to enforce the speed limit, repaint the existing crosswalks, add additional crosswalks where there are long stretches without any traffic lights, and place some traffic calming measures such as the yield to pedestrian signs at those crosswalks to remind drivers of the purpose of a crosswalk. I am excited to witness the upswing in commercial activity on the avenue, which benefits the neighborhood and the city, and I look forward to working with Councilwoman Bass and the City Council to assure the safety of our neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Can you move your mic? And welcome.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Councilman Bass, for inviting us to speak in response to Resolution 170224. My name is Deb Matafee, and I'm here representing Germantown Friends School. Germantown Friends School is a pre-K through 12th grade private Quaker school in northwest section of Philadelphia. I'm the Director of Security and Operations, and I'm accompanied by my colleague Nick Dobrowski, who is our Director of Buildings and Grounds. We currently have over 900 students and 250 faculty staff in our small area. And we're happy that the Germantown Commercial Corridor is heavily trafficked with buses, both SEPTA and school buses, cars, trucks, and pedestrians. And this is great for Germantown, but it impacts our students' ability to cross Germantown Avenue and Coulter Street. GFS faculty and staff and students using public transportation have to navigate Germantown and Coulter intersection, and it is currently on a traffic signal. However, even with the traffic signal, it's tricky as drivers routinely disregard it. They're on their cell phones, they're driving at high rates of speed. In fact, on April 6th, there were 2 auto pedestrian traffic accidents right at that intersection within 90 minutes of each other. The first one was a parent picking up her child, pulling a wagon with her toddler in the back of the wagon. A car traveling south on Germantown Avenue disregarded the steady red signal as well as the no turn on red sign and made a right-hand turn into the wagon. Luckily, the toddler was fine, but obviously shaken, as was the parent. Less than 90 minutes later, we had a faculty member crossing Germantown Avenue. A car was coming out of the east unit block of Coulter, making a left hand to go south on Germantown Avenue, trying to beat the light, struck the faculty member, ended up with a broken ankle and required surgery on that ankle. So that's just 2 incidents recently within 90 minutes. On Coulter Street, we have a school zone flashing light at the beginning and end of the school day with a 15-mile speed zone. There's also a crosswalk, which could use to be relined as well. And we have a flashing yellow light, and we have GFS has purchased some yield to pedestrian signs, and cars still routinely drive between Germantown and Green Street on Coulter at high rates of speed, talking on their cell phones. We have a school crossing guard that GFS pays for, a security officer who directs traffic with the handheld signs. Unfortunately, they disregard their directions. They routinely, I hear complaints from the security officers out there that, you know, they're being yelled at by the drivers of the vehicles, and they're being disregarded in high rates of speed. And we have children that cross during the day because we're located on both sides of the street. So our students are crossing multiple times during the day, and it's just a very dangerous situation. We have requested speed bumps on numerous occasions. Nick can speak more about that. And we would appreciate any support, and we would support any recommendations that you make to help improve the traffic flow in the city for pedestrians. So thank you very much for the opportunity to come and speak.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this panel? Councilwoman Bass.
Well, I want to thank everyone. Did you want to testify, Mr. I'm going to call you Nick, because I'm not going to mess with that last name.
Pull the mic
Thank
close
for
to
the
you and
opportunity
state
to
your
do
name.
this. I've been working at the school since
Yes,
1980.
Could you please state your name?
It's Nicholas Dobrowolski from Germantown Friends School. I'm the Director of Buildings and Grounds there.
Thank you.
And thank you for this opportunity to talk. I've been working here since 1980. I started there. This problem's been going on since 80 on. I applied for a permit in 1994 to install a 15-mile flashing light. We were granted the permit. We procured all the equipment, and the installation cost was on the school to do. And I have correspondence back and forth with the streets department since then. And the last one was 2015. They were supposed to do a study out there and then report back to me on the study, because I was asking to have them put in speed bumps just to slow down the traffic. And I've not yet heard anything back from the streets department. And I just don't know how long it would take to get a report back that if we can install speed bumps or not.
How long was this? I'm sorry.
This was done, the original letter went out in 2015. I had a response back June 1st, 2015. And that was basically stated it's going to take about 10 weeks to complete the study, and then I would get a report back from the streets department.
Stephanie?
Can you get the streets department back to respond to this?
They're hiding.
Oh, there he is.
There it is.
That was quick.
Again, this is Councilman Ali.
Pull that,
I don't know
please.
the specifics of this request.
Can you pull that?
Pull the mic closer, please.
Sorry, I don't know the specifics of this request, but I can assure you that as soon as I get back to my office, the first thing I'm going to do is look into that. One quick thing is speed bumps are illegal in the state of Pennsylvania, so I'm assuming you mean speed cushions or speed humps.
cushions.
Yeah. So I will look into it, and you will get a response.
Can we do a little better than that? While we complete this testimony, can you call back to your office and get us an update on where they are? Because every day that a kid has to go through that intersection, they are taking their lives in their hands. So we'd be glad to wait for you if you can make that call.
I can do it right now and make
Thank
some
you.
calls. Yeah,
Thank
thank you.
Thank you.
Does that conclude your testimony?
I think that concludes my testimony. That would be great to have a response back. Thank you.
Any questions?
Well, I just wanted to thank all of the panelists for coming down today. You know, certainly I know Bob Praviti from years and years of work on this issue and in support of encouraging bicycling throughout the city of Philadelphia and bike lanes and all of that sort of thing, and all of those sorts of things. So I just wanted to thank you for being here, for being an advocate for safe streets and for our neighborhoods. And of course, Ms. Pines, and for all of the work that you're doing along Germantown Avenue. And it's interesting, as you pointed out, that there's quite a stretch of Germantown Avenue above the 6300 block where there are no traffic lights, no stop signs, no crosswalks, no signals, no nothing, as they say. And so, crossing the street is, it's sort of like a game of Frogger, to some degree. I remember years ago when I worked at the office, the congressional office at Germantown and Philolina, we had the traffic light installed at that intersection when the bank and the post office went into that location. And so it went from being a very sleepy area where the Philadelphia Federal Credit Union is. There's a post office, there's a little breakfast spot, and a bunch of businesses that went in. And it went from being a very sleepy area to a very busy area overnight. And again, there was no traffic planning, no thought process behind it, because it was only after sitting at my desk and having a clear view of the intersection that I kept seeing cars crashing into one another. And that's when we were able to say to the streets department, hey, we need you to come on out here and to address this issue. So I thank you for, again, bringing that issue up.
Thank you.
And for the folks from GFS, and of course I'm familiar with that, and we've had numerous conversations with the neighbors in that area about, ways to slow traffic down. The thing about speed bumps or speed humps, I know that bumps or humps, whichever one is illegal, but speed cushions we'll call them. So, everybody wants them, and they do slow traffic down. But the thing about it is we can't speed bump the whole city, but I do think in some areas that they would be necessary, and I think particularly looking at where schools are, that should probably be one of our priorities, because it immediately slows cars down. Cars may not respect signs, but they do, drivers respect their own cars. So they don't want to tear up their own car. So that's why when they see a speed bump, they will certainly slow down. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to get you that information today before you leave, since you've been waiting for quite a while for it. And, if we can get, bumps out there or speed cushions, I think that will be a great thing. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank
Cindy,
you.
I have one other thing. I have the docket number too, if they want it.
Say again?
I have the docket number, the DS number.
You have
for
the DS
streets.
number?
Yeah, it's 38864.
Can we have you give it to the administration? Okay.
Yes.
They have it? Stephanie have it? Okay.
Okay. Yeah, it's DS 38864.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Ms. Williams, can you read the next panel of witnesses to testify?
Pauline Hill, Kelly Jones, Ben Litvinus, Marge Chance, and LeQuinn Vu.
Thank you so much for your patience.
Yep.
Have a seat, pull the mic close to you. You can begin your testimony in whatever order, but please state your name.
Good afternoon. My name is Pauline Hill. Thank you, Councilwoman Bass, Councilman Mr. Jones, and Councilwoman Jimmy Blackwell. My name is Pauline Hill. I'm a parent leader at Mastery Cleveland in North Philadelphia. I have 2 sons at the school. One is in 2nd grade and one is in 4th grade. Almost 2 years ago, myself along with other Cleveland parents saw our children weren't safe walking to school. We needed crossing guards at 2 major intersections. The first intersection was at 17 Pulaski and Butler, and 5-point intersection where there was no crossing guard. Each day I was afraid that a child would be hit by a speeding car. The second intersection was at 19th and Butler. We needed a crossing guard to guide children across the street. After some research, parent leaders at Mastery learned that there was an unwritten policy that charter schools were entitled to crossing guards. When we spoke to someone in the crossing guard unit about our concerns, we were told to walk our children to school and crossing guards won't be an issue. Many of you know not every parent can walk their child to school, but we fought for those rules to be changed, and we won. More than 20 Mastery parent leaders met with Police Commissioner Ross, and we got rid of the age-old policy and empowerment change. Today, we only not have crossing guards on both corners, but across 4 of the Mastery Charter Schools at the 7th District, different intersections. The Commissioner assigned Chief Inspector Larry Nodiv to address our concerns, and he's been walking with us. We are happy that we have crossing guards, but a lot more needs to be done to keep our children safe. On the 19th Street between Erie and Butler, which is where Mastery Cleveland enter the building each day, cars speed down there all the time. We have put in 2 requests for the Streets Department to come and assess the area for crosswalks closer to the school, and they did send someone out, but we have not heard anything since almost a year has passed. There's a sign that says slow down, and when the school starts, the school zone light flashes 35 miles per hour, but most drivers disregard it or don't even see the warning signs. That jeopardizes safety crossing for our children. Every student deserves to be safe. Children rely on adults for protection. It is the city's responsibility to see that every child has a great education, and every child who is going to school, whether they are with a parent or not, is safe crossing the streets. At Cleveland, we need speed cushions, more signs, and a designated school zone that exceeds 1 block. I'm here today to ask that you work with the Mastery Charter Schools and Councilwoman Bass to keep our children safe by completing a traffic assessment around the schools so cars can slow down. Let's make it less dangerous for our children to cross the street.
Thank you, Councilwoman Bash, Councilman Jones, and Ms. Blackwell. Good afternoon. My name is Kelly Jones. I am a parent of 2 students who attend Mastery Charter School. My youngest attends Mastery Climber at 12th and Rush, and my oldest will be graduating next month from Mastery Charter Pickett in Germantown. I am here today to talk about traffic problems we have around Mastery Climber and the need for a safer crossing for our children. Like Mastery Climber, we have had our share of issues with crossing guards. We fought and won for a guard at 13th and Somerset, but this post is empty. The guard on the corner was chronically late or often absent. She recently resigned, and now that corner is vacant, and it has remained vacant for months. We have been told that they are working on getting us a new guard. That part of the problem, there is so much red tape and hurdles to jump before crossing guards are assigned to corners. It took us a year to get the one, and we may not get another guard until the next school year. That's almost 2 years of children crossing alone. At Clymer, the streets are not safe. Drivers speed on both 13th Street and 12th Street between Somerset and Cambridge. They double park on Rush Street and Williams Avenue. They park on the sidewalk, forcing children to walk into the streets before and after school. Climate Parent Leaders has collected more than 500 signatures of parents, staff, and neighbors who want to keep families safe. These petitions will be sent to Councilman Clark for approval of speed cushions on 12th Street and 13th Street. We need clearly marked sidewalks and intersections and expect that to happen this summer. We need street paved and clearly marked signs around the school to let drivers know our school is here. We need the school zone signs to work consistently, and we need our new crossing guard. As a parent of an elementary student, I ask you today to work with Mastery charter schools to keep our children and families safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, again, good afternoon, Councilwoman Bass, Councilman Jones, and Councilwoman Blackwell. My name is Marge Chance from AARP. I'm the State and Community Volunteer Team Leader for AARP. We urge the Council to include provisions to require public input and engagement to the move to improve hazardous intersections. Public input will help to ensure that any plan of action is equitable, is transparent, and truly addresses the needs of the community. Such input will also ensure ongoing accountability. Thank you again for this opportunity to testify on this critical matter. AARP of Pennsylvania is committed to livable and age-friendly communities for all. And thanks again for having me.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions?
Yes.
Councilwoman Bass.
Well, I just wanted to say again, thank you for being here today, for taking out of your time to come down and to testify and talk about this very important issue. I'm certainly familiar with Cleveland, which is in my district, and I know, it's a scary proposition trying to get to school in the morning for a lot of those kids. And again, this is something where before we, think about, or I'll put it this way, as we prioritize what we're going to do in terms of traffic calming and in what areas, this should be a priority. Our schools, our daycares, and where our seniors are. These are areas that should be a priority. I was just sitting here thinking as you all were speaking about a hearing with the Liquor Control Board that we had regarding a stop-and-go establishment that was at the intersection of Germantown and Shelton. And I remember during the hearing, one of the people who came to testify was a daycare owner who was on Germantown Avenue and who talked about trying to get his children from the center over to Vernon Park, which is the park in the neighborhood, so that the children could go to the park and use the playgrounds and so forth. And that if they crossed at the intersections, when they crossed at the intersections, they would go through sort of like the loiterers, the folks who were hanging around and, up to whatever they were up to outside of the stop and go. And I'll never forget the attorney for the business said to the daycare center owner, well, why don't you just cross them in the middle of the street? Why can't you cross them, or something to that effect? Why can't you cross them somewhere else on the block? Can't they cross up the street and, outside of a crosswalk, a stop sign? And so we have to look out for our children. These are our children in our neighborhoods, and we have to advocate on their behalf. So I just really want to thank you all for coming down and for your testimony. And I'm a little less familiar with Clymer because it's not in my district, but I know the area. I know the intersection. And you said you also have a child at Pickett, yes, which is also another very busy intersection. Wayne Avenue, Shelton and Wayne Avenue is very wide, and so is Shelton. And so when you have these big wide streets, people tend to, just hit the gas pedal, floor it, and go as quickly as they can. I'm sorry?
I said my son was a victim of it in 2015. He was hit on Wayne and Shelton. So he broke his ankle. He had to have his ankle removed. So
he had to have his
ankle, the side of his ankle plated, so they had to remove it and replate it.
Oh, wow.
So,
wow. And I hope he's in good health now.
Yes.
Good. Well, I'm really sorry to hear that. But again, it speaks to, the statistics that I read earlier, which is how vulnerable even our older young people are as teens. And so, I just really wanted to thank you all for being here and for your testimony and really speaking up. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other witnesses to testify, Ms. Wade? Seeing none, would you like to close this out, Councilwoman?
Well, I want to thank everyone for being here. And as I said, to everyone who has spoken today, this is a very important issue. People in Philadelphia drive too fast. It's as simple as that. I can't think of a day that goes by that I don't get a request for a speed cushion, for signage, for a crosswalk, for flashing lights. No matter what the issue is, on a daily basis, we get these requests. And so I'm just really excited that not only were you here today, but we're going to take your comments and you are going to see some action out of these comments. You are going to see, I believe, some really good and hopefully very effective legislation. And if it's not as effective as we want it to be, we can always come back, make it stronger, tweak it. But we intend to try to get this right the first time because we realize that kids are getting hit, kids are getting hurt, seniors are getting hit, seniors are getting hurt. And just this weekend, we had someone who was hit and killed on a bicycle here in the city of Philadelphia. So, Bob Praviti, as to your comments, the way people drive in the city of Philadelphia is completely unacceptable, and we have to slow down. So, thank you everyone for being here. And Mr. Chairman?
Do you have an update?
Yes, I do. I just spoke with the district engineer for that area, and he informs me that they did studies twice. They went out there with the radar and clocked the speeds, and both times it was 20 miles per hour on Coulter Street. And right now, the way we define speeding is it has to be at least 11 miles or 10 miles over the posted speed limit. The posted speed limit over there is 25, which is the lowest we can post as per state statutes. During school hours, it's 15 miles per hour when the flashes are flashing. So I'm not sure exactly what time he did, which I'm going to go back and look at the whole file. And I promised the school that I will personally go there and meet them and do a study in front of them whichever time they pick is the worst time, and I will take it from there. So I exchanged my card.
Okay. Well, I thank you for, going out and doing the study with them. I think that that's probably something the streets department should probably do on a more regular basis, is to go out and meet with the community as you're doing your speed studies, because, you'll do a study, there won't be any communication, and people don't know what happened to it, what's going on with it, are you still working on it? As an example, the gentleman here today figured, you all were still working on it, or, just didn't know what happened because nobody got back to him. But if we're able to connect those dots and have you meet out when you do the study, that way they have information to take back to their constituency as well and let them know the results of the study. Maybe it was a good time, maybe they should ask you to come back at during rush hour, maybe we went at 2 and we should have went at 4. Those are the kind of things that we would like to see, I think, from the streets department. But overall, we do appreciate, and we know that you all are busy. We know you have a lot on your plate, and you get blamed for all that's happening. But this is the business that we are all in, which is public service, and trying to make sure that we address what the public need actually is. So we look forward to working with you and with GFS and with all of the other requests that we have. We put in, just in the last week, Mr. Chairman, we put in 2 requests for addressing ways to address street calming, whether they be change in street direction, because again, everybody wants speed cushions, and we can't put them all throughout the city of Philadelphia, but we can do other things such as changing street direction, in some places adding, the signage, painting the traffic lines to sort of guide the traffic, where traffic may flow from a wide street and all of a sudden become a narrow street. There are a lot of things that can be done, And we would really like to work with the Streets Department to be able to be effective in this matter, because it's something I hear about from my constituents every single day.
You're absolutely on the money. I apologize. We get paid for this, and if we don't respond, how are people going to know what we found out? So we are at fault over here, and hopefully that won't happen again. Can I take 2 minutes of your time and give you a little bit of historical perspective on, 2 minutes?
No, but go ahead.
Thank you. I've been here more than 2 decades, and Councilwoman Blackwell can vouch for it. I've been advocating traffic calming since many, many moons. I'm the one responsible for the first speed cushion in the city, speed hump, the lead pair interval, as we call it, when the signal is green for the pedestrians to cross whenever all the traffic is stopped, raised crosswalk, you name it. How did I get done? This lady, a young lady over here, who said that on Germantown Avenue, only Duval Street has those flashing lights, or rectangular rapid flashing beacons. You know how I got that in there? I actually asked for a favor to one of the suppliers to give us one to test, and got it free from there because we didn't have the funding for it. So I tried, I formed partnerships with Penn, Drexel to get all these other things done. Long story short, we are working on it now that we have Act 89 monies, which is a steady funding for all these projects, and we hope to do a better job than what we have been doing.
I know that the chairman has to go, but I just want to say one last thing to close this out, is that in 2013, I believe, we all passed a bill that we put forward to increase monies that go towards traffic calming, remedies. And so we all voted affirmatively for that, and we know that there were additional monies that came to the street department as a result of that. So I don't know if you know how much that was added to the pot, but if that's something that we need to revisit, if the pot needs to be bigger, that's something that we need to potentially look at.
Just quick thing, we
No,
ordered
that was
a second.
That was it. That was your 2 minutes.
Okay, 10 seconds and I will not talk again. We just ordered another, because we got good monies from Act 89, a whole bunch of speed cushions, which we are now doing in a second cycle of installing them.
Oh, good. And we'll put a few in the chairman's district for being so gracious.
Thank you. Thank you all. This concludes our public hearing on resolution number 170244. This committee will stand at recess to the call of the chair.